Hello and welcome to this evening's webinar. Nice to see so many of you on the call this evening. I'm sure you know that this is a Reiki Guild webinar. I think most of you on the call tonight are Reiki Guild members, but for those of you who aren't, Reiki Guild is an organisation which honours the lineage and teachings of Mikao Usui, and we are a highly professional association and community of teachers and practitioners, and we offer training and support to our members as well as networking and fun events. And if after this webinar you would be interested in finding out more about us, I'll give you some details at the end of how you can find out a bit more about the Reiki Guild. Before we get into the webinar itself, I'm just going to run through a bit of technical information in case there are any of you on the call tonight who haven't been on one of these webinars before. Now, if you can't hear us, check that your speakers are on and that you've got no loose connections anywhere. Often there is a simple explanation. Sometimes we've just forgotten to unmute our speakers. Now, sometimes during the course of a webinar, our internet or your internet drops out for a few seconds or minutes and you may lose the sound, but it often comes back, and that's why one of the reasons we have slides, so that we just keep your attention. There's nothing we can do about that. It depends on where you live and how good your internet is. Now, you should be seeing a chat box in the top right-hand corner of your screen. Unfortunately, if you're looking at this on an iPad, you may see the chat box, but it doesn't always work. So I apologise for that. If you want to ask a question or make a comment during the webinar, you type in your questions into that chat box. And just so that I can check that you can all hear me and that everything is working, perhaps you could just type hi or hello into that box, and then I can see that that's working, and you can see how that works as well. Okay, I've just seen that you can't see my screen, so I've now turned my screen on. Okay. Right, so there's question marks in there. Good, so you've all asked some questions. That's great. Okay, so that's working. Apologies for not having the screen on earlier. I'm just going to go back to show you the slides at the beginning. Okay, so as I said, Reiki Guild webinar, and I'll give you some more details about that at the end. And here's the pieces about Mikao Usui and about our group. Okay, we're back on track now. Okay, so now we've got the chat bots working. You can also raise your hand to attract my attention. There's a little yellow hand icon. It looks a bit like a glove. Again, you might want to, if you could all have a click on that so that I can see that that's all working as well. Great. Excellent. Okay. Now, obviously, I will be looking at those chat boxes and looking to see if anyone's trying to attract my attention. But because I'm also running the webinar, if I don't notice you straight away, my apologies in advance. I will get to you as soon as I can. Towards the end, we will also have some time for asking questions. If you've got headphones for your mic, you may find those helpful because we'll get a better quality of sound. We'll be able to hear your question more clearly if I open up the microphone to speak to you. It's not compulsory, but if you've got the headset, it just makes it a bit easier for everybody to hear. Okay. So this evening's webinar is about safeguarding. And with me this evening I've got Angela Chapman, who many of you know as the Treasurer of the Reiki Guild. Angela was a teacher for 25 years, beginning with primary school, and then she moved on to special needs and behavioural issues children. ultimately she finished her career in the education sector with the Gypsy Traveller Education Project here in Bromley. Now, Angela has been a Reiki practitioner since 2003 and a committee member of the Reiki Guild for the past 6 years. Now, currently she's chair of governors at a local school and she has responsibility for special needs and child protection. Now, as a school governor with responsibility for child protection, Angela has to attend a safeguarding course every 2 years. The focus is on the child, obviously, because she's in a school, she's a school governor, but a lot of things about how staff need to protect themselves from allegations of misconduct are covered in the safeguarding courses. And of course, a lot of things that apply to children also apply to vulnerable adults, and some of you may be seeing children in the course of your Reiki work. So the Reiki Guild felt that information in this area would be relevant to our members. So I'm going to bring in Angela now, and we're going to talk about some of the things that might apply to you. I will be keeping an eye on the questions and comments, so if you do want to bring anything up, just type in your question into the box and I can put that to Angela. Right, so first we're going to look at the area of potential misunderstanding. So, hello Angela. Angela. Oops. Let me just take Angela off of mute now. Right, unmuted you, Angela. Yep. Sorry, I had you muted.
Unmuted.
Yeah, you're unmuted now.
In case I jumped in when I shouldn't have done.
No, that's fine. No, I could hear some background noise, so I muted you because there was something going on somewhere. So here we are. So handing over to you now for explaining to us a bit about potential misunderstanding.
The main difficulty that people are going to have is that it's going to be on a one-to-one situation. So if there are any allegations, it's going to be a patient versus the practitioner. Mm-hmm. You need to be very careful that you are not having any misunderstandings at the very beginning. Mm-hmm. You need to say exactly what Reiki is, that it can be hands-on or hands-off. Mm-hmm. And it would be in your best interest to have something in the information work that you have, the information sheet that you have at the very beginning when you're taking client details, to have a small sentence that says, I understand that there may be some touching involved. You have to say that it's going to be away from any personal areas, and that they agree or don't agree for mm-hmm. hands-on. Mm-hmm. Because otherwise you could get somebody saying, I told you I didn't want to be touched. If they have signed it and said, yes, that is fine, as long as you are touching me away from private body areas. Mm-hmm. You can even have something to add that people don't like their feet being touched, or they don't want their head touched. Something you can add that's specific. Mm-hmm. And once they've agreed to that, get them just to initial that little section, because then they're not going to say, I didn't think you were going to touch me, but you have. Mm-hmm. Now, at one point, Louise, you said that some people feel pressure, even mm-hmm. though all your treatment is hands-off. Mm-hmm. If you explain to people that it is just the Reiki being channeled and that's what they can feel, the energy rather than your hands, and say, are you still happy with that? Mm-hmm. Then again, a little initial just for saying, realises that there will be no hands-on but may feel. Mm-hmm. It's just to make sure that somebody can't turn around and say, you told me you weren't touching me, you did touch me. Mm-hmm. Because it's very tricky when you're only one-to-one.
Yes, and I think I said the other day that sometimes you hear or you see people describe Reiki as Reiki massage, and obviously you and I know that that's not what it is, but you may get a client coming to you who thinks that it is some kind of massage.
Well, you'd have to say it would be massage with Reiki, so that they know that a pure Reiki treatment will not be massage at all, and then say that you only remove your shoes and outdoor clothing, so that there would be no skin-to-skin contact. And also, if they want to have a massage, then you will be covered by your other insurance and understanding that this is a massage treatment with Reiki. But there can be misunderstandings, as you said, that people think they have to remove their clothing, and they don't, but you can get yourself into serious trouble.
Yeah, and
It's just allegations.
absolutely. And, you know, maybe this is something that you need to bring up when somebody actually first books their appointment, that you make sure they know what Reiki involves before they even get to you.
Well, people come for Reiki not understanding. Oh, you could say, sort of, why are you here? What do you understand that Reiki is? Why, not just why have you come for treatment? Why have you come for Reiki? Say, look, you know, this isn't spiritual healing. It isn't a massage session, and explain that's what it is, and it can be without touching at all.
Okay, right. That's the first thing we're looking at. Okay, have I gone forward too many? Right. Okay, now we're going to look a bit about the safety of the practitioner themselves, as well as the safety of the clients, because you know, we always think that safeguarding is about children or vulnerable adults, you know, making sure that nothing happens to our clients. But of course, as we've just said, you know, there are opportunities for misunderstanding when people might make allegations against the practitioner. So perhaps you can just say a little bit about that for us.
Well, you have to realise that in some instances you are inviting a stranger into your home, and until you get to know that person and know that there are no side issues of depression, mental illness, you should have somebody else on the premises with you. I've highlighted that because there is a lady who lives almost opposite me who is a masseur, and her clients get referred to her from her doctor's practice, and she will not take anybody on if her husband is not in the house, because she said the doctors don't really know the true background. If they sent them for massage, they don't know there are any mental health issues. And she says for her own safety, she will not work alone with them. And so she does it in the evening when her husband's home, and she can be fine. Other people that she knows it's a physical one, after the first couple of sessions, she says she knows, she uses her gut instinct. If it feels wrong, it is wrong. And if, you know, so, but if it feels fine, then she can make it a daytime appointment. But she won't make any new appointments in the daytime because she works from home. If you do work in isolation, whether it's in a building, in part of a practice, you should set up a little emergency system whereby there's some way of you being contacted or contacting somebody else just to say everything's fine. I mean, when we were doing home visits at school, we could have a telephone call or a text, and we could just say, oh, I can ignore it, sorry, we're busy. But if it was a problem, we'd say, this is important, do you mind if I take it? So you've got a get out clause. You've got to work out something that suits you, that can be your method of getting out, so that if you just feel it's wrong and that you don't want to continue. Again, I've said, let the people know there is somebody else in the building. It could be, oh, my partner's just come home from work, but we won't be interrupted, or and say why they're there.
Yeah.
And we used to make a joke of it to say that, oh, this makes sure that I don't attack you and hurt you. You can call for help if you need to. So putting it on their security rather than your safeguarding. So that's what we always had to do, because you are a lone worker in some instances.
Yes.
And some clients, you may not know their background at all.
No, I mean, that's just common sense, isn't it? But sometimes you feel someone calls you to make an appointment and they seem like a nice person, but as you say, there are lots of people with mental health problems that you wouldn't necessarily know, and people tend to be a bit cagey about telling you if they have got mental health issues. So, you wouldn't necessarily know that there was going to be a problem. I mean, certainly I've had clients who it's been several appointments before I've actually found out quite how serious their mental health issues were, and it's you simply don't know. So it really is just a question of not taking any risks, because as you say, it's going to be one person's word against yours.
And unfortunately, with the practices now that the lawyers have, injury lawyers for you, no win, no fee, you're in a very difficult situation.
Yeah.
And also, it strengthens your insurance if you have taken out certain precautions.
Yeah, absolutely.
So this is what we do. Should it happen, I've done it.
Yeah, absolutely. So the next thing we've got on here is, what could you do, again, to minimise opportunities for allegations? And so we've talked a bit about, having someone else on the premises, but there are also things that you could do, even if there are people on the premises.
Well, the focus, I said dress appropriately because that was something that was instilled in us as teachers, that especially when you're going into secondary schools, that when hormone levels, with boys in particular, but also with girls, are shooting up and down, that you make sure that you are covered up and also look professional. So if you are giving a Reiki treatment, I mean, part of my training was try and look like a professional, that you dress appropriately, short sleeves, no low-cut necklines, because you could be leaning over somebody. Because then again, allegations can be made. She led me on, he encouraged me.
Yeah.
He gave me the wrong impression. Whereas if you're looking like a professional, then you're halfway there. And I mean, if you look like a nurse or a dentist, it doesn't really matter. But as long as, that's the sort of professional dress that is recommended, then nobody can misinterpret, what you might be saying, or what they can interpret.
Yeah, absolutely. But I should put in there that, you shouldn't go the other extreme and be wearing anything that suggests you might actually be a medical professional. So,
no, that's true.
Yeah, absolutely. Be careful about what you'd wear. Yeah, but you don't have to wear, a beautician's top or anything like that. But as you say, just look like a smart teacher might, or someone working in an office.
But there isn't a uniform.
No,
but
no.
There needs to be an awareness that somebody could misinterpret the way you're dressed.
Absolutely.
It's safeguarding.
Definitely.
We always have the door ajar when you're alone with an individual. Was one that was highlighted because it means you can say, if you're feeling uncomfortable, then you can leave. And people can say, the door's ajar. It's also for you, because if you feel that things are getting a bit too heated or something's gone wrong, you can leave the room. Don't have a key in the door, so that people can either think you are going to lock them in, or they could lock you in. So you must have an obvious means of exit. Don't block access between your treatment couch or your chair, or however you're giving treatment, and the door. so that either of you can exit freely should you wish to.
Yeah, and I think that's a very good point, because when we talked about what we were going to say this evening, I did say to you that I do have a key in the door of my the room I use, but it's on the outside because I've let myself in. But of course, it's quite easy for anyone to grab that key and use it on the inside. I also, there is a question of client confidentiality. If you've got the door open and you're in, say, an office like where I work, where there are several therapy rooms and there are people going past, people can then hear what's being said in the room. So I don't know what you think about that.
You would have to say, is it okay if I close the door? Just because it might get a bit noisy, or we don't want people hearing what you're going to say. But sort of realise that you are just closing the door so that it's not locked. Just say, I'll just push it very gently so that everything's fine.
And then obviously
it depends on your own situation and what your decision is.
Yeah, and then of course once the treatment starts, you could always then open the door slightly once anything that needed to be said that was more private. You could shut the door.
And you could explain that, just for talking. But you might say, I've just a little bit of ventilation or something in case you get warm or it gets. You can make excuses about it. But
yes, and I think it is quite an interesting point for not just for your safety, but also for nervous clients. I once had a client. She was recommended to me by a mutual friend. She didn't seem to be that nervous, but it was obvious once she got on the couch that she was finding it really difficult to relax. But she had the treatment and she came back for a second one. And when she came back the second time, she told me that actually she'd felt very vulnerable being on the couch because she felt she couldn't just get up and leave. So when she came for the second appointment, I treated her in a chair so that her feet were on the ground and that she could stand up and leave any time she wanted. And, that had never occurred to me, that people feel much more vulnerable lying on the couch. So that having the door slightly ajar, again, would be another way of reassuring a very anxious client that, they could leave if they wanted to. And of course
it's a subliminal message, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
We don't want you to go, but if you want to, you can.
And then we've got this issue of when we give treatments to children. And certainly I wouldn't see a child without there being a carer in the room, but I have got a colleague who is a teacher, and she sees nothing wrong about being alone with a child. And obviously she is CRB checked, but I've said to her I don't think she should be alone with a child.
No, the CRB check is one where you can work with children in a child-friendly environment. It's for schools, it's for scouts and guides, if you run a youth club, if you are going on a school trip or you're part of a group. It doesn't cover one-to-one at all.
Right.
When I was at school and doing one-to-one, we were always told, if you're going in a classroom, make sure you are in view of the door, because the doors have glass panels in, so that people can look in and see what you're doing. Don't take the children to and from school. If you take them to a sports activity, then you're taking 3 or 4, however many can fit into the car. But it was emphasised, it does not cover you for one-to-one in an environment where people cannot supervise you.
Right.
Because the check that is done covers your history. And once you have the check, you could go and commit a crime the following day, and nobody would know, because that doesn't have to be renewed for a few years. So it really is saying that you have no history of a serious crime, but it doesn't give you freedom to say, I can work anywhere with a child. I mean, nowadays even childminders have to have these CRB checks, but they are usually working on a one-to-one very rarely. I mean, a nanny, I suppose, is something that a parent has to make a very serious decision about, to entrust one person with their child. But as a teacher, it's for you to work with children in an environment where other children and people are around. It doesn't cover you for doing anything at home.
No. And when we discussed this topic last week, when we were preparing the webinar, Angela, I was very surprised when you told me that young people are regarded as children up to the age of 19.
Yes, they are now. I mean, that's the legal issue, that's the CRB issue. Very young ones, obviously, the parents would want to be in the room to see what's doing and to reassure the child. Anybody older, I would say, sit outside the room, so that they are still on the premises, because they haven't given you the authority to act in loco parentis.
No.
You know, very few younger people go to a practitioner on their own. They could be transported and dropped off. It may be that after the first treatment, when you've asked the carer, the guardian, the parent to stay for an older child, you then say, how do you feel about leaving your child with me, and get the parental consent for that, rather than presume that because they're a teenager they're okay. It's covering yourself. You need to get written permission.
Now, certainly I would always get written permission for an under 16, but I've seen 18-year-olds, and because they are legally adults at 18, this is where it's a bit strange, isn't it?
You'd have to sort of consider their home circumstances. I mean, legally, if they're still at school, it's 19.
Yeah.
If they've left school and they've taken responsibility for themselves at college, then you could just sort of say to them, you know, do you want me to get permission, or do you think it will be okay? Or even, you know, can I have a little permission from your parents to say, or if they've left home, they're living independently, just say, I need to check that because you are 17, 18, you're quite happy to be respected as a young adult, and I don't need permission. It's a case of playing it by ear. It's just with vulnerable young people, you have got to be very, very careful.
Yes, I mean, this is, I assume this is coming with the new safeguarding legislation, because also the school leaving age has been put up, hasn't it?
Yes.
So it's, I always find in the UK this is really peculiar, you know, this age between 16 and 18, where for lots of things young people are considered to be adults, but others they're not. And we have this sort of mix and match of what you can do at certain ages. It just seems, you know, really strange. You know, you can be married at 16, but you're not legally an adult. You know, it seems very odd.
Home.
Yeah. So it does all seem a bit odd. Now, these things you mentioned vulnerable adults there, and of course all these things that we've talked about here would apply to vulnerable adults.
Yes.
And I've had these conversations before about what constitutes a vulnerable adult. And certainly when we were discussing the previous child protection legislation, it was thought that the definition of a vulnerable adult was anyone who was actually getting treatment. So while you were in your dentist's chair having dental treatment, you would be considered a vulnerable adult. Is there something different in the new legislation?
No, you are vulnerable because if you're you've put yourself into somebody's hands, and you have to trust that they are acting in your best interest. I'm taking it again from my training, which is on the education side, that vulnerable adults are young people who will need to be in care till the age of 24.
Right.
Now, whether that's supervised care or care in the home, or who will need to have special college placement or for training purposes, that's how they're considered sort of vulnerable adults. But as you say, if somebody is having Reiki treatment and falls asleep or relaxes so intently, you are placing them in a vulnerable position.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's very tricky.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So, I mean, some of these slides kind of overlap each other, but you know, we're kind of thinking that people should actually look at the way they practice if they are seeing clients, and you know, what sort of changes should people make to their practice. So, you know, we've spoken about making sure you dress appropriately, making sure that you don't see a client for the first time in a place where there's nobody else in the building. We didn't talk about chaperones. We said something about chaperones actually when we did the run through for this last week, because I think, you know, if you feel vulnerable, you can always have a chaperone in the room.
Oh, yes.
Or if your client feels vulnerable, they can have someone else in the room with them, can't they?
Yes.
I've certainly seen elderly people who I think would definitely be counted as vulnerable adults. I've on several occasions seen elderly people with their daughter in the room who's brought them, and you know, they say, "Oh, shall I go away?" And I say, "No, I think, you know, stay in the room with us." And of course, they often benefit from being in the room while the Reiki treatment's happening anyway, because they're going to feel calmer and more peaceful for being in that room. So I often encourage people to stay when I'm seeing a client, because often they're caring for that person and they're under a lot of stress and strain themselves. But it's also an added safeguard to have someone else in the room. So I don't know whether anybody on the call has got any questions or comments at that point. I mean, whether you've been looking at this now and whether you're wondering whether there's some changes you should make to the way that you practice. I'll just have a quick look through. If you've got a question or a query about this, you can either type a question into the box or put your hand up. Adrian and Margot, your hands have been up for a long time and I can't put them down. Could you put your own hands down, Margot and Adrian, and then I'll know if somebody's put their hand up anew. Your hands have been up right since the beginning and I can't get them down. If you click on it again, your hands should go down. I do sometimes have this, that the hands get stuck on. Adrian, your hand is still stuck on. Okay, I've got one question here. Okay, now Sophie says she works alone. Now Sophie's saying, on the occasions that I treat men, not often, I ask them to get a woman to refer them to me. And Sophie's saying that she works alone from home.
That's a good idea, to get a female perspective. I would still have somebody around for that very first treatment.
Yeah, I have to say I would as well, Sophie. Or else maybe just for that first appointment, you know, rent a therapy room somewhere where there will be people about, just to be on the safe side. I work in a practice with a couple of other therapists, and if one of us has got a new man that we haven't seen before, another one of us will often go and be in the building, because you really, you just don't know, and it's better to be safe than sorry. You know, you may have a friend who's more than happy to just come round and just be in the house that first time. You know, it's very unlikely that anything's going to happen, but you know, it's someone you've never met before, someone you don't know, and the second appointment you may be absolutely perfectly happy to see them on your own, but just to have someone in the house that first time. I also know coaches, for instance, who always make their first appointment in a coffee shop, so that they're in a public space when they, obviously that's not something you can do for Reiki treatment, but you might want to meet them in a public space first, just to have a little chat about what it is they're looking for and to see whether you're the right person for them. You know, and you could do your form filling in at that point and then see them later for the treatment, and that way you'd kind of check them out beforehand, so that, you know, there are lots of ways around it, and I think because we're in the business of helping people, we can sometimes be a bit too trusting.
And forget to help yourself.
Absolutely, yeah, and help yourself first is always the motto.
And the other thing is too, you could have, if you've got a friend, a neighbour in for the first treatment, and you feel very comfortable and you think, yes, this is okay, you don't need to tell the client that there won't be somebody there the next time.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a friend, she's not a Reiki practitioner, she does another therapy, but she often used to have the radio on or the television on in another room, so that it did sound like there was somebody else in the house. So, you know, a little bit, I know we like it to be nice and peaceful during a Reiki treatment, but if it sounded as though there was somebody else in another room in the house, that again, you know, and as Angela said, it may actually put the client at rest, in your mind at rest, as well as yours, because they may actually feel more comfortable knowing that they're not alone with you, because it works both ways. Okay. Anybody else got a comment at this point? No. Okay. So we've got some other things here, Angela, about recording incidents. If something, heaven forbid, does actually happen, what you should be doing in those circumstances.
Yes, you need to have somewhere where you can record either something that's happened, if a client lost their temper or was incredibly upset and it didn't finish on a good note. Put that down, record it with the time and the date. You do need to make sure that you have that written record, because if it comes back to you, you can say, oh yes, somebody was very upset, or that something had happened. It would be better if you can refer the incident to somebody. Ideally somebody in a professional situation, not just a family member who would back you up, but somebody who could say, okay, you've told me about it, I don't think anything will come of it, but thanks for letting me know. I mean, it may be your association, if you're a member of the Guild, you may report it to somebody at the Guild. They won't do anything about it, but if it's been referred and recorded, then you know that you've got backing, and it's more than just your word against theirs. Because you hear of these stories that 3 months later people think, oh, well, I've had a phone call from the solicitors, I might be able to get some money for some reason. And so you have to be careful that anything that you feel is not quite right, make a note of it and record it. It's like a little sort of accident book, if you like.
Yeah, and
the majority of things will come to nothing.
Yeah, and this could just be in the client notes that you're keeping anyway. You know, you just could put, you know, the treatment ended abruptly, they seemed to be very upset and they stormed out the room. You know, But you might, if you're working in a therapy rooms, you might tell somebody, the manager or the owner of the therapy rooms, that this happened, because obviously there might be someone might complain to them as the people who are running the therapy room. So it would be a good idea to say something to them that this incident had happened in case they're contacted. But as you say, even just another therapist or somebody else you know, just saying, you know, this happened, this was a bit odd, I just wanted to talk to somebody else about it. And it may not even be something concrete happens, but sometimes you might just have a feeling that something wasn't right. And again, making a note of that would also be a good idea. And of course, I mean, I think if something happens from a health and safety point of view, so if there's an accident, you know, it would be a similar thing, that you really need to make a note of it.
Mm-hmm. Yes, as we said before, if somebody trips over your carpet, or bruises themselves, or falls down the stairs, that is a health and safety issue, and you must record that. And it may be in that instance you have to notify your insurers. Yeah. And say there has been an accident. The person seems okay. I'll get back to you if it goes any further.
Because of course, you know, somebody might leave and say, no, everything's fine, and then, as you say, a few weeks later you may get a complaint, because although they've said at the time that they were fine, they might not feel fine later, or they might talk to a friend, or they might turn it over in their mind and decide that actually they weren't happy with the way things went. So, you know, it is really important to record everything, and to tell somebody else.
It doesn't have to be in great detail, because it's something that will jog your memory of the incident. And the other time is if people get really distressed because they released something that they've been holding on to for some time. Make a note of that, because if other people see them coming out of your practice in tears, or having been sort of tearful, then rumours can go. If you know, oh no, it was as a result, it was, you know, she feels better after that release, and there isn't a problem, because other people can stir things just as easily.
Oh yes, yes. No, I mean, I one of my Reiki students had a treatment from somebody, and she felt really unwell after the Reiki treatment. In fact, had to sit in her car for some considerable time afterwards. And again, you know, if anybody seeing her after that would thought, well, you know, that's not right, is it? You know, that she should be in that state. So, yeah, you know, you do. Well, you have a duty of care as well to your clients, that you know, if something happens that you can do something about as well. But again, it's worth noting, you know, she felt very unwell after the treatment. She sat in the waiting room for some time before she went home. She seemed fine when she left. You know, that sort of thing, as you say, is worth recording in case there's any comeback later.
And you've dated it.
Yeah.
So you know exactly when it happened.
Yes, because, you know, it might be months later when something comes up and you can't necessarily remember what happened, or when it was, you know, so it is important.
It's more when it was, because the actual issue is confidential. Yeah. But the time that they say that this was this incident, then you can say, yes, okay, you can then recall what you need to. Yeah. But as I said at the end here, you use your intuition. If everything's fine, just make a note. Everything went well. If it isn't, make a note of the little things or the big things that happen. And again, if you're giving treatment and you feel uncomfortable, then you end it early, and find a way of saying, you know, I'm sorry, I don't think it's going to work today, or I have other things on my mind. I'm not concentrating. Can we finish early? So you blame yourself,
Yeah.
but without saying, I got a funny feeling about you. I don't want to continue.
Yeah.
But it has to be one where you say, look, I can't charge you for this because we're finishing early. When I'm in a better frame of mind, perhaps we can get back together. And then, if they insist on making an appointment, then you can cancel later.
Yeah, and of course, you don't have to give a Reiki treatment to anybody that you don't want to.
No.
It's not, you're not a compulsory Reiki practitioner. If you don't feel comfortable with somebody, you don't have to work with them. And there will be some reason why you don't feel comfortable with them. And for your own safety, just don't go ahead with it. And as Angela said, yeah, absolutely. And as Angela said, may say you don't feel well, or some reason make it about you that you can't do it, and get out of that situation. Okay, now I think that probably is, yeah. Well, we've come to the end of the slides that we had. And of course, if you've got any further comments or questions, Angela has very kindly said you can contact her, and that's her email there, angelachapman@hotmail.co.uk. And if you could just mark emails safeguarding so that she knows what it's about, otherwise she'll just delete you and she won't reply to you because she's like that. So obviously if you're listening to the recording rather than on here live, if anything occurs to you when you're watching the recording, you can contact Angela, or of course you can also contact the Reiki Guild office with any questions or queries you may have. So we have got some time left now, so if anybody has now thought of a burning question or would like to make any comments, I can open up for that. So does anybody have any more questions or comments? You can either put your hand up or type a question into the box. If you put your hand up, I will open the microphone and speak to you live. Everybody's very quiet this evening.
Well, the idea is that we've raised awareness.
Okay, well, Adrian's got her hand up. I'm going to open the line to Adrian. Adrian, I've opened your mic. Are you there?
I am.
She's there.
I just want to thank Angela for a well thought out discussion tonight. It is very well received. I really don't think people really think about what they're doing or how they're doing it, and this, I think, really opens all our eyes.
Great, thank you, Adrian. I'm going to mute you again, and Ivan, I'm going to open the line to you. Ivan. Good evening,
Hi,
Ivan.
can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Good evening.
Good evening. Well, thank both you, Louise and Angela. Very interesting, very informative, and it's very good to have these things highlighted. My comment is the Reiki Guild treatment consent form should really be brought to people's minds because it covers a number of the things that have been highlighted. For instance, the first one is, I have been advised that if I suspect I have a medical condition, it's about people sharing the right information.
Yeah.
But, so really, it's not just that, but really the consent form that lays out the fact that people, their body is respected, and the terms and conditions really of their treatment.
Yeah.
Because I think this is what Angela particularly was trying to highlight, that both parties should clearly understand what the terms and conditions of the contract are for their treatment, and that it applies to both sides.
Yeah.
both the practitioner and the client have a responsibility.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Definitely. Lovely. Thank you very much for those that contribution, Ivan. The consent form, is that available now on the website if people haven't seen that?
Yes, it's. I'm saying yes. Certainly Adrian would know, but certainly.
Well, maybe contact the office. So if anybody's interested in that, I'm going to suggest that they contact the office.
Yeah, I'm sure it is.
Okay, lovely.
I'm sure that's where I downloaded it from.
Lovely. Thank you, Ivan. Okay, I've got a comment here from Larissa. Larissa says, excellent, a very good, well-structured session. A lot has been covered that I haven't thought about. Thank you. Yeah, and I think that was the idea of this evening's presentation, that a lot of this is common sense, but in our very strong desire to help other people and show compassion to other people, we forget to show compassion to ourselves, and sometimes that can get us into trouble. So it's always worth thinking about ourselves first. And that doesn't make us selfish and doesn't make us any less good practitioner, but we do need to have this common sense attitude to what we're doing. Okay, would anybody else like to say anything or type any questions or comments in? Okay, if not, thank you for joining us this evening, and as I've said, Angela's more than willing to answer any questions or take any comments on her email address, or else go through the Reiki Guild office at the info@the Reiki Guild email address there. And if you're listening to this call and you're not a Reiki Guild member, you can go to our website, which is thereikiguild.co.uk, and you can find out a bit more about what being a member of the Reiki Guild will do for you. Or you can call the office on that number, 0208 462 1224. But again, those numbers are on the website. So, last chance for anybody want to put their hand up. Oh, Adrian's got a hand up again. Okay, I'm just unmuting you, Adrian. Did you want to say something else?
Okay.
Yeah.
What I was going to say is that the sheet that Ivan was talking about, it goes
Right.
into the welcome pack.
Oh, okay.
When a new member becomes, and that's the only time we do it. We're hoping they make copies and they use it, but we only send them out in the welcome packs of new members.
Okay, but if somebody on this call wanted it, if they emailed the office could then send them a copy, couldn't they?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. Okay, so that's good. We can get access to those. And it may be that some people, like me, I've been a member for a very long time, so I may not have seen that. I mean, I do have a consent form that I've been using for years, but this may be a new improved version that I haven't seen.
Yes,
so,
it is.
Yeah, so,
it is.
So I better email the office so I can take a look at that as well. Okay, so that's what you need to do. If you want to have a look at that consent form, email the office and get a look at that new consent form, because I suspect there are quite a lot of people who have been members for quite a few years, and so it's been a long time since they had a welcome pack. So I'm just going to unmute you. I'm going to mute you again, Adrian. Thank you for that. Oh, there is just one more question down there. Right. How do I get a recording of the next webinar on April the 7th, as I have to work on April the 7th? This is a webinar that is just for teachers in the Reiki Guild, and I will send out the recording. Everybody who registers for these webinars, for any of our webinars, I obviously have your emails when you register, so once you're registered, if you don't, well, even if you do watch live, I send everybody who registers for the webinar a recording of the webinar. So if you can't be here at the day and time of any of our webinars and you want to listen to the recording, you still need to register. And I'm not offended when you don't turn up live. I just send you out the recording usually the next day as soon as I've got it sorted out. So don't worry about that. You will get the recording. And of course, if you've got any questions on the topic, and you know in advance that you've got a question about a given topic, if you send in the question to me, which my contact details are usually on the registration, if you send in the question to me, I can ask the question during the webinar. And so then when you get the recording, you will still hear your question being answered. So there are ways round all this if you can't be on our webinars live. Okay. Right. Anybody else with the last minute comment? I see Ivan. I don't know whether you've just put your hand up again. So I'm just going to unmute Ivan. Did you put your hand up again, Ivan?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Sometimes I can't tell.
Okay, thank you. It's just to say, going along in addition to what Adrian was saying, that as a new member, the last year or so, that information pack carries a lot of forms and documents that people could find very interesting, because there is a sample consent form for children under the age of 16.
Right.
There is a sample client record. There is a sample record of treatments, and so it's all laid out for people that who haven't got the documentation. It gives them a lot of documents that they can look at and maybe alter for themselves, but it gives them the basics that they need for maintaining the records in their practice, and it shows you the important things that they need to be able to record that they've said to their client, and also they record details of their treatment, and it's all set out in the little box. You could put, if there'd been a slight problem, you could make a note, and that could, that is your reference, and it keeps it all in the same place. But just these documents are obviously contact the Reiki Guild.
Okay, yeah, that's helpful. Thank you for that, Ivan. Sounds like there's more than one form we need to get a look at then. I may actually ask the office if we can put all those forms together in one place, so that people who are on this webinar or who have registered for this webinar, I may be able to make those documents available at a Dropbox link. So I'm just going to make a note to speak to the office about, because I won't remember by the morning, and see if I can make all those forms available to everyone who's been on this call, because it'll be quite easy to set that up. So I'm just going to unmute Adrian, because I think I think your hand went up again, Adrian. Did it?
The only thing I was going to say is we'll be there on Thursday.
Okay.
If you want to call in.
Yep.
Okay.
That's fine. Okay. We're just coming up to 9 o'clock. Look at that. That's very good timing. And Angela was worried that we wouldn't be able to go for an hour, you see. Just shows you what happens when you're having fun. Okay, so thank you very much, Angela, for doing that for us and coming up with all those great ideas and being with us this evening, even though you were a reluctant techno person.
But,
Well, you're not a reluctant technophobe, you are a technophobe.
yes.
So despite that, we were all right on the night. So thank you everyone who listened live, and if you're listening to the recording, thank you to you too. And thank you, Angela, and we'll see you in a couple of months back on our next webinar. So good night.